Welcome back, my beautiful friends. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York. I'm your host, Zen Sams. Now, up in just a few, we have the Scandals segment with returning contributor Imran Ansari of Idala Bertuna Commons, otherwise known as ABKLaw, right here in New York City. We're going to be covering the crazy twist of fate of Robert Durst's murder conviction, and now that he will be vacated on legal technicality from beyond the grave. Durst died in custody on January 10th at the age of 78 and was recently convicted of murdering his best friend, Susan Berman, in 2000. That is one of many crimes he committed. And we're also going to be discussing Vanessa Bryant and how a federal judge ruled that a lawsuit over crash scene photos stemming from her late husband's, Kobe Bryant's helicopter crash, can in fact move forward, keeping it on track for a jury trial set for next month. Now, U.S. District Judge John F. Walter concluded that there are genuine issues of material fact for trial and denied the LA County's motion to dismiss the case. Vanessa Bryant sued the LA County Sheriff's Department and other agencies for emotional distress, basically claiming first responders took and shared unauthorized photos of the human remains of her husband and daughter at the crash site. Now, the county's lawyers maintained the images were not publicly disseminated. Now, here to break it all down is Imran Ansari. Welcome back, my friend. And what another scandal this is.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy New Year's, Zen, and I'm happy to be here.
Happy New Year. So let's start with Vanessa and we'll circle back to Durst. So Kobe crash, right? We have all 9 people on board this helicopter. They died when the aircraft crashed into a hill in Calabasas, California amid the heavy fog while they were traveling to a teen basketball tournament at Kobe's Mamba Sports Academy. Now, I'm going to directly quote the complaint that basically sums up her anger, and I want you to tell me what's up here. Now, this is specifically what she's claiming. Now, the close-up photos of Gianna and Kobe's remains were passed around on at least 28 devices and by at least a dozen firefighters, and that was only the beginning. The gratuitous sharing continued in the following days and weeks and included such outrageous conduct as flaunting the photos in a bar while pantomiming dismemberment and showing off the photos over cocktails at an awards gala. And one deputy laughed while sharing the photos, while another described the crash victims' remains as hamburger and piles of meat. Wow. She's now seeking millions of dollars in damages for this emotional distress. What is your take here, and will she get it?
Yes, Zen. Well, this is one of many cases that have came out of this helicopter crash, civil lawsuits and whatnot. And this is where Vanessa Bryant is suing for invasion of privacy and negligence. And you just summed it up from that complaint as to this, the egregious allegations that first responders had taken these photographs and they shared it, not necessarily with the public. And that's what they're saying. They said that, there shouldn't be a case. There's no damages here. The public didn't see it. But Vanessa Bryant is saying otherwise, saying you shared it amongst yourselves. You made light of it. And now she's suing. And yes, a judge said, okay, this motion is denied. They try to get it thrown out of court. He said denied, and it's going to go to a jury where a jury will decide whether this conduct was invasion of privacy, was it whether it was negligence, and whether Vanessa Bryant and her family were damaged from this. And I think that they're going to have a compelling case, Zen, based on what we see or hear in the complaint. Of course, they're allegations, but the allegations are pretty egregious because you think first responders, you're there to help. This is a tragedy. And the last thing you want to think about is that photographs of your loved ones in their most, horrific state are being shared and made light of.
It's really sickening if this is in fact true. I mean, and if of course you're going to have the county attorneys argue that her claim of emotional distress caused by the alleged sharing of the cell phone photos is just based on hypothetical harm and lacks standing since the images were never publicly circulated and she never saw them. But what? Are you kidding me? That is not even morally proper for somebody to counter on that. You know what I mean? Like, this is obviously, my heart goes out to her. So this is a little bit of a complicated situation, but I think based on morals and values, it's a home run for her.
Yes, and on the legal side, let's just take the defense position. In a case like this, you need liability, and then also you need damages, right? And they're saying that the damages aren't there, and they're speculative, meaning that they weren't put out there in the public. and whatever hurt or harm that Vanessa Bryant is alleging is pure speculation. But if they can show, meaning the plaintiff, meaning Vanessa Bryant, and her attorneys can show that this caused her emotional harm, pain, and suffering, and she had to hear about this, and even though she didn't see it herself, just the thought of this going on, if it's proven that these were shared like that, that may be able to get it to a jury and an award at time of trial.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, look, the county says that her lawsuit is without merit, and they had recently asked the judge to dismiss it in summary judgment, and it said that that Vanessa Bryant never saw the actual photos, that the photos were deleted, and that no photos were shared outside of county personnel, except for when that sheriff deputy showed some crash scene photos to a bartender at a restaurant 2 days after the crash. So if the judge had agreed with the county's motion for summary judgment, her lawsuit would have been finished right there, right? I mean, pending any appeal. But the bottom line is that the judge's ruling gives her new leverage against the county if she is inclined to settle the case before trial, right? Because I mean, that it would set precedents.
Yeah, Zen. So, that summary judgment motion, basically it's a trial on paper, and the filer of a summary judgment motion is asking the judge, say, hey, there's no question of fact here that should go to the jury. You should decide this case yourself on the papers, on the law, and you could dismiss it. Well, the judge in this case said, no, I can't do that. There is something for the jury, and it should go to the jury to determine, and that's what's going to happen unless it settles beforehand. And yes, you're right. She has leverage now because now that summary judgment motion wasn't successful, and she's facing, or the defendants are facing, a possible jury determining their fate.
Yeah, and look, the county previously agreed to pay. Let's not forget they had agreed to pay about 1.25 million settlements to two other families who lost loved ones in the same crash. They had filed similar lawsuits over the sharing of photos, but Vanessa has not shown the same willingness to call off her lawsuit in exchange for a payment. So I'm feeling like that is definitely going to set precedents.
Absolutely, Zen. And we'll wait and see if it goes to trial.
Yeah, exactly. So the question is moral or money, because she's out for blood, I think, just on a moral level. All right, back to Durst. So this guy dies in custody January 10th of this year. He was 78 years old. They had begun the process of appealing his September conviction. He was found guilty of the execution-style murder of his best friend, Susan Berman, who died in 2000. And the prosecution argued during trial that Durst killed the Los Angeles author because she knew too much, right, about the 1982 disappearance of his first wife, Kathleen Durst, whose remains have not been found. Now, death during a pending appeal results in a canceled conviction due to a technicality in California that prevents convictions from being finalized until a decision is rendered by the Court of Appeal. What? In this case, what?
Zen, it is an area of the law which is echoed in not just California, but echoed across many states, including here in New York, where I'm sitting right now. And, if there's an appeal of a criminal conviction, and the defendant dies during that appeal, well, guess what? That conviction is vacated. It's abated by virtue of that death. Now, let's be a little, specific here. It does not mean it's an acquittal. So Robert Durst's attorney made a comment that this would be a posthumous acquittal. Well, that's not quite correct. An acquittal means that a jury did not find the evidence sufficient enough to find you guilty of the crime. Here, a jury did find Robert Durst guilty. So it's not an acquittal by any means. It just means that because of this procedural technicality, when there's an appeal pending, and the appellate court has not put a stamp on that conviction, it means this is abated, it's vacated. And let's think about this, what happened after this conviction. We know that, Robert Durst's wife, Kathy Durst, her body has never been found. That has not been solved in terms of a crime, but a grand jury in November of last year in Westchester County indicted Robert Durst for charges related to that disappearance of murder. And right now, because he's dead, that's also going to be, basically put aside because now he's dead. He can't answer to those charges.
Yeah, exactly. And back to what you just said, it's important to not minimize his heinous crimes, because the fact that Durst's death during the pendency of his appeal will cause the conviction to be vacated is an unfortunate, like you said, technical rule, which in no way diminishes or changes what we all know what happened, which is he's guilty. And at this point right now, Robert Durst is infamous for escaping justice. So things may change with the California legislature if they were to put something in code that overrules the precedent. But as for now, I guess there's nothing that can be done because the Court of Appeal has no discretion whatsoever. There's no exception for anything in this case, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, and Zen, Robert Durst sort of took pleasure, it appeared, in his sort of evasiveness of these charges, which eventually caught up to him years later. And right now, just sort of his an end chapter in this very story with a lot of twists and turns, which I'm sure there's going to be some movie made about this. There has already been one which was based on Robert Durst, and I think there's going to be another one because this is sort of the latest twist and turn that Robert Durst he again, not necessarily literally but figuratively, escape justice.
Yeah.
Again
Yeah. I agree. Well, listen, we're out of time. Imran, it's always a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you so much for coming on. It's always insightful to get your perspective on things.
Thanks for having me, Zen. Always a pleasure.
Absolutely, guys. Check out Imran Ansari. He's on the gram at Imran Ansari ESQ. And you can also check them out at idalalaw.com. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York. We'll be right back after this.